Hello everyone, welcome to a BrainScratch Searchlight update. I'm your host John Lorden, and today we're going to dive back into the case of Madison Scott. I have a lot more details to cover, a few corrections from the first video. All of this information is coming directly from her mother, Dawn, who I've been communicating with in email. Thank you so much, Dawn, for answering all my questions and sending me all this wonderful information. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with the audience. And we are working to see if it's possible that I might be able to interview Jordy. Dawn is trying to kind of broker that for me, and keep your fingers crossed, because I'd really like the opportunity to let Jordy kind of speak for herself and maybe clear the air on some of these things that have come up. But let's get started. I have copied and pasted pieces of several different emails together, so unfortunately this isn't going to read as a very coherent letter, but I will try to fill in any gaps in terms of what these facts relate to as we go. And also, just in case you are unfamiliar with the Madison Scott disappearance, I have included the link to the original BrainScratch Searchlight in the description box below, so you could watch that and refresh yourself on it. Just to give you some insight, this is a case of a young woman who goes camping, and she is out there for a party. There are a lot of people at this party, and they all leave her behind, essentially, so she can spend the night out there. We're going to learn today she wasn't the only one that was supposedly going to stay out there, but the next day she disappears and she has yet to be found, and it's certainly tragic in many ways. But let's jump into Dawn's information. First off, Maddie's sister Georgia, who was 15 at the time, was at the party at Hog's Back on the Saturday night. Georgia saw Maddie's truck and tent set up when she was out there. So I'm taking that as, and of course we know that Maddie was missing at this point, so Georgia certainly didn't see Maddie on Saturday. A young male, 17-ish, who was identified and interviewed by police, flattened Maddie's tent late Saturday night. I still don't understand what would motivate someone to flatten a tent. I don't know if he was messing around, he just thought it'd be something funny to do, if he thought someone was coming back to spend the night there and he was goofing on him in some way. I'm not quite sure as to the motive, but it was a 17-year-old that flattened the tent on Saturday. Jordy did not come out to Hog's Back with us. She came out with her mom later on that Sunday, I believe, after the police had shown up at Hog's Back and the news had gone viral. And you're going to see there's a couple of clarifications here about particularly Jordy's communication with Dawn. And this is certainly one of the first big ones. According to them, Jordy wasn't out there with them on that Sunday morning. It wasn't until later in the day that she comes out there with her mom. A little bit of an interesting tidbit. It appears that Jordy actually started dating her boyfriend Tyler on the night that Maddie went missing. So if you remember in the first video, I kind of questioned, if a young woman has a boyfriend, what are the odds that she's going to stay at this campsite unless he was going to stay there with her? Kind of makes sense that if he was sleeping somewhere else, that she was going to go stay with him. Well, it appears that they weren't even really a couple until this night. This is one of those things I would really like to get cleared up. I hope that I get to interview Jordy for herself so she could speak to this and kind of fill in these gaps for us. Hog's Back Lake is 22 feet at its deepest. It has been searched very thoroughly. Currents and flows are familiar and known. We very early on had trained cadaver dogs who find human remains in water on Hog's Back Lake and other surrounding bodies of water. So that's something. She's also responding to some of the questions that she saw some of you write and post on the first video, and that's something that has come up a few times in her writings with me. She just wants you guys to know they feel extremely confident that that Hog's Back Lake has been searched thoroughly, and there is little to no chance that Maddie is actually in that water. She states, "You are correct. Maddie is not part of Highway of Tears. We worked hard to stress this point. I believe that's one of the things that the family is a little upset about due to some of the television coverage that keeps kind of clubbing Maddie's story to the Highway of Tears story. Obviously, her family firmly believes that this is not the case. We have never believed that there was a connection between Maddie and Fribjin Bjornsson. Yes, they hung out a bit of summer of 2010, but that's it. It's a small town. They both played on the same ball team. Police say a lot of questions will be answered once Frib's trial is over. I find that very, very curious. I'm really interested to see what questions police think will be answered once Frib's trial comes to a conclusion, but I think we'll have to wait to find out. People came and left in groups the Friday night at Hogsback. The last group that left had sober people who had shown up after their shift, asked Maddie if she wanted a ride in with them, but she said no as she was in bed and didn't want to leave her belongings. Maddie would not want to be out there on her own. Someone else must have been there. Everyone from Friday and Saturday night are known, have been cooperative, interviewed, and polygraphed by police. This is pretty interesting to me because this is the first time, and we're hearing this directly from her mother. I personally, honestly didn't even consider that maybe Maddie was there with someone, staying out there with someone that she knew. But it's really strange to me that none of the party goers have spoken up about this other person, because essentially that would mean one of two things. Either this is a person that has not been known to police at this point, or this is a person that is known to police, say that they left that night, possibly passed a polygraph stating that effect, but in essence didn't do that and actually stayed behind with Maddie. So I'm very curious as to what the truth in that could be. And it does kind of make sense to me. It would certainly be another motivating factor for Maddie to stay out there if she indeed didn't think that she was going to be alone. I'm even starting to wonder, you'll see some information in here later that she got in that tent kind of early. I'm wondering if this person was in the tent with her, if the later party goers didn't even know that that person was in there or something along those lines. It's just, that certainly raises a lot of questions. Maddie's tent and bedding have been sent to labs to be analyzed. The tent was cut into pieces. Police say nothing was found, but I'm hoping otherwise, and they're just not saying. Police have all of Maddie's belongings still. Apparently, the tent and bedding has been sent to 2 separate labs. Dawn also talks about the fact that she's very good about cleaning their camping gear when the children bring it back home. So she feels like, particularly the sleeping bag that Maddie would have taken out would have been extremely clean when she took it. So any forensic evidence that they could pick up from that would be pretty valuable. Unfortunately, they're not hearing about any quite yet. Hogsback is southeast of Vanderhoof, not northeast. I think I got that from a report wrong, but that's just a clarification on the last video. No, Jordy did not have her own tent there Friday, May 27th. She and Maddie intended to share one of our tents. Maddie took 2 with her. They started setting up the first tent, realizing that it was Maddie's pup tent. They put it away and started to set up the large domed tent soon, realizing that the poles were left in town. Maddie and Jordy drove back to the house to get the large domed tent poles. This was approximately 9 p.m. What I'm curious about here is a little bit of this time frame. If they're driving back to get the poles for the tent at 9 p.m., they get back to the camp, set it up, and it sounds to me like Maddie pretty much hangs out inside the tent from that point forward. I'm really, it's weird. I don't know if she was just intending on spending the night there that night and sleeping so that she could enjoy the lake the next day or something along those lines, but it doesn't seem to me like she was partaking in the rest of the party in particular, because we'll see some comments later, but it sounds like by 10 p.m. she's actually hanging out in the tent. Once again, maybe this leads us back to that conclusion that there's someone else in there with her. The only person I know other than Jordy and Tyler that went back to the campsite Saturday morning was the birthday boy, Garrett. Garrett was turning 25 that weekend and had celebrated his birthday at Hogsback several years in a row. Garrett always cleans up the following morning after his party. He saw Maddie's truck and tent. Door was zipped closed, but didn't bother to see if she was in there, thought she was sleeping. This was at approximately 10:30 a.m. Jordy and Tyler had gone to Hogsback before 9 so she could get her clothes and sleeping bag before she went to work. So we do know that supposedly Jordy and Tyler went on Saturday. I know I talked about that in the first video, but apparently the only other person to go out there was the birthday boy Garrett himself to help clean up, and that was after Jordy and Tyler were there. There were others not from the party that were at Hogsback Saturdays during the day. One couple were on horseback out for a ride. Another couple drove in, saw Maddie's truck and tent, but thought nothing of it and carried on. Jordy did not call us ever. She's very clear about this. She's actually said it to me in a few different emails. I got Jordy's cell number from her mom, Debbie, Sunday morning when I called Jordy's parents' house to get it. I didn't bother to call Jordy because she was at work at the time, and when her mom said she had been in since Saturday morning, I knew we had to get out to Hogsback. I also tried Maddie's cell again Sunday morning. It went right to voicemail. So the story that I had reported before about Jordy contacting Maddie's mom, definitely not true. Apparently there was no contact, at least in that direction. It was Maddie's mom that reached out to Jordy, and much later than the Saturday that Jordy discovers Maddie's missing. I'm surprised Jordy didn't contact me on Saturday after seeing Maddie wasn't in the tent. But with having to get to work, a new boyfriend, we didn't have each other's cell numbers at the time. We do now, and I stay in touch with her. I guess Jordy didn't think anything of Maddie not being in the tent. Once again, I'm just hoping that this interview comes together with Jordy. It seems somewhat logical. Maybe she thinks that Maddie met someone, maybe went off with them. There's definitely some reasons that Jordy could not be so alarmed. Maddie and I were texting at 11:30 Friday night. She had an incoming call at 12:30 a.m. from a young guy who we know. Every cell phone record has been checked. Every phone that pinged off of certain towers has been checked. The police have and had full access to whatever they needed. There was nothing outgoing after the 12:30 a.m. call. So we know that there's a little phone activity with Maddie on that night, but 12:30 seems to be the last point. There have been more RCMP investigative tools used on Maddie's file than any other case in BC history. I honestly don't find the timing of the rings strange at all. I was asking her about how the rings were discovered, and some people have commented that it seems like they were possibly placed there. I find Maddie's jewelry everywhere. Windowsills, counters, dressers, down couch cushions, in the driveway where they've fallen and broken after getting in or out of her truck. I hope I'm not being closed-minded. I just don't see them as being significant. I think if we make the assumption that Maddie dropped them herself, and obviously if she has that kind of history of not taking care, her mom told me this isn't expensive jewelry. This is almost like costume jewelry stuff. Then I certainly would think that there's nothing significant to that. What I do find a little bit significant here is the jewelry. If Maddie disappeared on Friday night, the jewelry had to sit there all day on Friday, all night on Saturday night. It wasn't discovered until some point on Sunday. And on Saturday, you had twice as many people there as you did on Friday night. And her tent was set up right in the middle of this campground where everyone was partying. It just seems to me that someone might have picked up on the fact that, hey, that tent over there with the zipper, look right below the zipper, there's jewelry sitting right there. Especially when you consider one of these partygoers flattens the tent. So he's at least in that area, he's manipulating the tent. Granted, it could happen at night. Maybe this jewelry isn't very reflective. I mean, there's certainly reasons why it could have been looked over, but when you have that many eyeballs out there, that many people engaging that area, I just find it a little strange that jewelry would sit out there for the better part of 24 hours or more. There was a guy there for a bit Friday night that Maddie had shown some interest in, had for a while. He told her he just wanted to be friends. Maddie was a bit upset, but nothing drastic. There was another guy that showed interest in Maddie, but she told him that she wasn't interested. He got a bit huffy, according to only a couple of people, not a public display, and has been put through the ringer. That sounds pretty suspicious to me. I'm glad to hear that they have looked into him. particularly because if he was let down by her and he got huffy, that's showing some type of propensity for him to have a reaction to his dealing with her. So, but it's curious that we didn't hear about that before, especially on the stuff that was publicly released. Back to the rings real quick. I don't think the rings were found until Sunday. Jordy found them around the 10th Sunday while we were with the police. She then gave them to a mutual friend, Kathy, who gave them to me at a later point that day. I hung on to them for a day or two, mentioned to police, who took the rings and bagged them. Now we're going to jump back to Maddie's relationship. Maddie was not dating anyone at the time. She was on a couple of dating sites. I'm so torn as to whether to think it was someone known that took Maddie or a complete stranger. There are so many ways to access Hogsback, so many roads, side trails. We have camped there a lot since Maddie went missing. Never before. Almost guaranteed that someone comes in there at all hours of the night and day. It's a well-known area, and yet it isn't. The locals know the area like the back of their hands. We had many good local people searching all the back roads, trails, as soon as we knew Maddie was missing. Thousands of miles have been clocked, literally. Someone on the video mentioned that we need to look further than a 3-mile radius. That's one of you BrainScratch commenters out there. They have no idea how Hogsback and the surrounding areas have been searched by foot, ATVs, horseback, vehicles, and air, searching shoulder to shoulder, going through trees and bushes that were almost impossible to get through, but people did to make sure the area was searched and searched well. At 10 at night, you were signing the last groups in for the day and calling to book flights for a helicopter the next day. This went on for weeks. And that is some of the information that we reviewed in the first video comes from that time period back then. So we were only hearing about pieces of the searches, and that's what I was reporting on. She now has years of history on these searches, and they are very comfortable and confident that they have looked every which way to try to find Maddie out there, and much more than a 3-mile radius, which was actually reported early in the investigation, that they had checked at least a 3-mile radius. It looks like they have checked far beyond that at this point. A couple of years after Maddie went missing, while we were at Hogsback, we saw over 200 different vehicles come in and out of Hogsback over a 48-hour period. There were cars coming and going. Sunday, after I had called police and were waiting for them to come to Hogsback, I stopped every car, knowing most of the people, but none had seen or heard anything about Maddie. Maddie is careless with her things, but protective. If she had felt unsafe, I'd like to think that she would have called us. I think she just didn't want to go because she had been in bed for ages and just didn't want to pack up and leave. Maybe lazy. That is responding to a question that I had put to her about Maddie's motivation for wanting to stay there that night. She was obviously concerned about her things, where she didn't want to leave them. So she did understand there was some risk of something happening to her things if they were left there. But I was questioning, why shouldn't she have questioned what would happen to her if she was left there alone? So this was her mom's response. Maddie is very intelligent, wise, thinks things through. This is not something that should have happened to her. I'm torn as to if anyone was there with her. We've heard nothing to say there was anyone with her. Funny thing is, Maddie had several plans that weekend. She always had something on the go. I honestly believe Hogsback was a last-minute plan. That is supported by one of the specials that was released on this. I know that there was a friend of hers that she hadn't seen in a few years that was coming back into town, and she told her friend that she was going out to this area instead, so that's certainly supported. I read some of your readers' comments and made a few notes. They are as follows. Maddie was not intoxicated the night she went missing. She had a bottle of wine and a 6-pack of beer with her. She was sharing the wine with a couple of people that night, and there was still beer in the cooler when we got to the truck on Sunday morning. Yeah, I mean, you know, a bottle of wine you can figure is good for about 4 glasses. If she's sharing that with a few people in particular, that means she's having 1 glass, maybe 2 at the most. I don't think that would severely impair her. And if she only had a 6-pack of beer and they still found beer in the cooler when they got there on Sunday morning, it once again strikes me as just a little bit strange, considering there's all these party goers that were there on Saturday. Maybe, I don't know. I really don't know. Yes, dogs were utilized several times by us and RCMP. We brought a dog team in from the States that were specifically trained on the water. We searched several bodies of water in the area. So they have not just looked at Hogsback Lake, but they have looked at other bodies of water in the area as well. Jordy moved to Vanderhoof, I think it was in grade 10. They did hang out a bit in high school, but they weren't tight. May 27th, the night they went to Hogsback, was the first time since they graduated 2009 that they had hung out. And here she's speaking really to the relationship between Maddie and Jordy. Apparently, it's not like they were the best of friends and had been, through thick and thin together. These were girls that kind of casually knew each other, decided that they were going to hang out at this party that night. And of course, we know that things didn't quite go that way. The wild animal theory has been gone over and over. The way the area was searched, there would have been signs. It was a late spring and any tracks going off the beaten path were very obvious. Yeah, and the other thing about wild animal theories that I find in these cases is the experts will tell you, you will typically expect to find tracks, but also things left behind. Wild animals are not conscious of what's happening if they're pulling someone away. So shoes get left behind, jewelry gets left behind, pieces of clothing get left behind, wounds might happen, there could be blood that's left behind. So there would be some type of trace evidence, I also believe, if it was a wild animal attack. Maddie was not being drunk and stubborn that night. Maddie was the sober one and had already been in bed long before the others. We too think it odd, the amount of drinking that went on and nobody camped that night. The birthday boy got into a fight with his girlfriend and pulled up his camp at 2 a.m. and headed to town. Now, I didn't realize that he was also planning on staying out there, but hearing that he decided to pull up his camp at 2 a.m. to go back to town, I really wish that would have prompted Maddie that, hey, I'm going to be out here alone. Maybe I should also do the same. But unfortunately, it didn't. And, obviously this guy's in a fight with his girlfriend. He's probably not in the best mindset. But you could also say, man, isn't it too bad that he didn't think about, oh, there's someone else that's staying out here. Maybe I shouldn't head back into town. But, hindsight's 20/20. Jordy only went back to the tent on Saturday to get her belongings because she had to work the rest of the weekend. I don't think she went back to check on Maddie, just grab her belongings. A couple of things I find odd about this. Jordy grabbed her sleeping bag and favorite pillow. Jordy hadn't used her sleeping bag since a high school trip where they had been hiking and she got a blister on her heel. When the police analyzed the sleeping bag, they questioned her about the blood. Jordy told me recently that the police asked for her sleeping bag and pillow right away. The sleeping bag hadn't been washed in a good couple of years, and yet when Jordy went home, she threw her pillowcase in the laundry. I do think that is also a little odd. Once again, would make for a great couple of follow-up questions if I do get the chance to interview Jordy. It is kind of curious that she would be so interested in washing her pillowcase. I would assume the pillowcase was actually in the tent with Maddie at the time. Was there something that got on it for some reason or I don't know what could motivate that action, especially when you consider that she doesn't normally wash her sleeping bag if she has blood from a wound on it from several years before. So I totally agree, Don. There's certainly some questions around that. We had some people do some investigative work right after Maddie went missing. We needed answers as the police weren't telling us much, and I totally understand this. When our people interviewed Jordy, she was very concerned and wanted her favorite pillow back. It's weird because Jordy, according to the first video I did, and especially your response to that, a lot of you have some very serious questions about Jordy, at least what motivates her. She has come across in some of the media as not being particularly sensitive to what's really going on in this case. And now we're starting to see this trend where there's something about this pillow possibly. I don't know. Could it be a piece of evidence in some way? Who knows? It's very, very odd. People wish they could see the police reports. We wish we could see the police reports. Not a chance. I totally get that. One of the things that I say very frequently in the videos is I wish I could see these police reports for myself. Obviously, this is an active investigation, and it's one that it's a huge one for Canada. It's a huge one for the BC area. Do they want people going through their work and possibly criticizing how they handled things? Probably not. It's interesting to me because my personal opinion is if that's the only risk, that you're trying to cover up how good of a job you did or didn't do, that is a very small risk as opposed to discovering the truth of what happened to this girl. So I would like to think that people in those types of positions might be bigger people than being that shallow. But you also have the aspect of this being a current investigation. So I get it. I get why these records aren't available. I wish that was a little bit different, particularly as cases age, which I know I talked about in a few videos last week. I would hate for this case to go to the point of Jacob Wetterling's, where we're looking back decades after the fact and saying, hey, could we see these records now? Or do we need to wait for someone to admit to doing this? Maddie did not run away from home. That theory has been ruled out. I think there are some certain signs that she did not run away from home. Obviously, she leaves her vehicle. She leaves her purse behind. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. The only thing she takes are her car keys, which doesn't make sense if she's leaving her vehicle behind, and her iPhone, but I don't believe that there's any more activity that has been traced on that. Once again, doesn't make sense if it's a true runaway. The theory, too, that it was Jordy targeted that night, not Maddie, has been brought up and discussed. Kind of an interesting tidbit there. We adamantly stated that Maddie did not have any valuable jewelry on her that weekend. Maddie is always taking her jewelry off and leaving it in random spots. That is why I don't think the rings being found were of significance. There are houses reasonably close to Hogsback if Maddie had started to walk. No need to get to the highway for help. It's quite populated area out near Hogsback. So I think that helps their thought that this is not a Highway of Tears case. She wouldn't have had to go that far if she needed help of some kind. Israel Keys has been brought up and ruled out. I did a little research on him. Apparently he is, or was, a bit of a bad person. I think he worked primarily in the Washington area. Probably not too much of a stretch for him to drive up into Canada, but apparently he has been ruled out. Hogsback campsite is a very small area. Maddie's truck and tent were very close to the action both nights. This too is kind of odd. Maddie had a cooler, nice dirt biking boots, a hatchet, I think a bit of gas, and none of that was disturbed. I can see nobody touching it on the Friday night, but Saturday was a very young crowd, and it seems funny to me that all those things were still in the back of the truck. Let's add the cooler with the beers to that. I really, really find that odd, particularly if it's a group of young people that are out there partying. If there's a cooler, I would think someone's going to look into that. If they find beers, I would think they're probably going to drink them or offer them to other people. So I do have some problems with some of this logic as well. There are 3 areas to camp at Hogsback, 4 actually, but the far side of the lake is private property, but he doesn't seem to mind people camping there. There is the main site where Maddie was. There is a Camp 2, which was on the east side of the main campsite. To the southwest is the Tarzan Swing, or Camp 3. You can see the Tarzan Swing from the main camp, but you cannot see Camp 2. There were others camped at the Tarzan Swing. After looking around the main camp and Maddie's truck and tent, I noticed there were people camped at that Tarzan Swing. I walked over and saw that it was a friend of Maddie's. Sam had set up her camp late Saturday afternoon. Maddie and Sam used to hang out in high school, but Sam had moved away and they didn't see each other as often. I spoke with Sam, told her we are looking for Maddie and had she seen her. Sam said she had seen Maddie's truck but hadn't seen her since setting up her camp Saturday afternoon. Yes, Sam too has been interviewed by police. Search a 3-mile radius, question mark. Try more like a 100-mile plus radius have been searched. And you have to remember, this family's been dealing with this for years and actively dealing with this. On top of their personal searches, they have events annually. They're getting people out there constantly looking for Maddie. So for them to be searching that same little 3-mile section over and over probably doesn't make a lot of sense. It sounds like they've expanded the search quite significantly. The police had a helicopter flying, as did we. We logged hours and hours of flying time, also had the infrared out immediately after Maddie went missing. You mentioned on the YouTube video that you'd like me to answer people's questions. First of all, thank you, Don, for doing so, at least in this method. This definitely works. It would be great if they joined the Help Find Madison Scott Facebook page and did some research. So I will also include a link down below in the description box back to the Facebook page, and do encourage you guys to join that page, do some research. You can ask questions there, but just realize these people are a bit sensitive with what's going on, so please be careful how you phrase things. If you're looking for feedback and you phrase things correctly, I'm pretty sure that Dawn will respond to you directly through the Facebook page. But she's also told me she's had a few not quite horror stories, but you know how the internet can be. There's some people that are very impersonal or don't phrase things correctly, and it has hurt their feelings a bit, so please be cautious of that. That's all I have right now, John. Thank you for supporting us and Maddie, and for your donation to the Search Fund. We are forever grateful for the overwhelming love and support we have and continue to receive. It's what keeps us going. We all have one goal: to find Maddie. Thank you for your kind words, support, and inspiration. And Dawn, thank you for opening up and sharing all of this with us. The more truth, the more salient facts we get, I think the closer we all come to understanding what is really going on in this case. Quite honestly, the next piece for me would be hopefully to be able to interview Jordy. I would like to do so via Skype if possible, but if not, I would even do it via email. I just really want to get her feedback, and she is the best thing that we have in terms of firsthand witness of the accounts of that weekend. It could be that she has some information that she doesn't even realize is important to solving this and cracking this case for good. I would like to think and hope that the RCMP has interviewed her several times and tried to shake all this information out of her, but you never know. It could just be the right question at the right time and something changes. I would love that opportunity, and also to give her a chance to really clear the air. As I've stated, she has not been represented in media very well, and I would certainly give her a chance to do that. So Jordy, if you're watching this, please trust me, I would be extremely careful in how we handled that conversation, but we are just looking for the truth. I do have a long list of questions I would love to run by you and get your input on. Well, that's it for this Searchlight update. Thank you all for spending some time with me, and my hopes and prayers go to Madison's family. Stay strong out there. Please keep doing your amazing work. You are inspiring us, and I hope someday you have the answers that you seek. Thanks everyone, and I'll catch you on the next show on the Lord and Arts channel.